Hello, everyone. We are live. To those of you who this is your first event, welcome to the Catamaran Writing Conference virtual reading and lecture series. To those of you who have seen some of the earlier events, welcome back. We had to postpone our conference this year at the beautiful Stevenson School on 17 Mile Drive, which has been a 7-year tradition for Catamaran. But it's going to happen next year from July 25th to the 29th, 2021, and you can sign up for that now on the Catamaran website, so make sure to check that out. But we wanted to get in touch with a bunch of the writers around Catamaran, the poets, and the different nonfiction and fiction authors, and kind of hear from them in this year as well. So yesterday, we talked about fiction with Karen Joy Fowler, Josip Nabakovic, and Lisa Fugard. On Monday, we did poetry with Zach Rogau, Joe Millar, and Susan Brown. And on Sunday, we had our keynote with Jane Smiley. And you can check all these out on Crowdcast at Catamaran Literary Reader. So if you click on Catamaran Literary Reader, you can see all the previous talks by scrolling down to the bottom and looking at past events. Or you can look at the upcoming talks, of which there are 2 more after this one. Later this afternoon, we have Joan Staffen, and then early this evening, we have Charles Hood and Dan White, who will be doing a reading as well. So I hope you'll join us for those events as well as this one, and make sure to check them out again on Catamaran Literary Reader. Right now, we have Neal Snidow. He earned his MA at the University of Virginia, where he was a Danforth Fellow. He is the author of the memoir Vista Del Mar and currently writes, teaches, and practices photography at Magalia, California. Now, before we hand it off, let me explain a little of how Crowdcast works. So down at the bottom, you're going to see the Buy His Books button. It's really important. If you click it, it's going to take you to the book fair page where you can buy signed copies of Vista Del Mar. All right. And then we also have the Ask a Question button. And the Ask a Question button is going to allow you to either ask a question or suggest a topic for us to talk about. This talk is going to be mostly listener driven. So if you could, give us as many topics as you want, I'm sure we will get to all of them. All right. Now, why don't we start off, Neal, by talking a little bit about the work you've done with Catamaran?
Thank you so much. Hi, Matt, and everybody else. Lovely to be here. And being here virtually is perfectly fine. It's lovely of you all to join us. Well, let me see. Catherine Segerson, who is the editor and publisher of Catamaran, and I were speaking the other day, and we talked about my first publication that they first picked me up in 2015 and published a very seminal essay that I was calling Meter to the Black at the time. And it was crucial for me that got into print, and it was a real hinge point, a linchpin, a hinge point for me in writing. But Catherine said, hadn't it been 10 years since when that was published that you'd been working on the book? And I didn't immediately contradict her. You don't want to do that to people, the publishing. I'm just teasing, but I thought to myself, actually, it had been 20. So I began working on this long project in 1996 and taking pictures. And that date I used to pin down as kind of a marker for time to pin down in the opening paragraph of the book. But it was a long evolution. And the book writing seemed to come in kind of parallel with really, I guess we could call it a hobby project of some sort. I had the impulse in about 96. My dad had passed away. He was gone for 3 years. My wife and I were in, I would say, things were a little difficult in life at that point. My mom was living by herself in Southern California. It seemed like time to sort of do this thing. And I had this sort of envision this sort of project of going to my old neighborhood and taking pictures. And that's what the opening line of my book says. And I'm showing it to you. Here it is. There it is. Okay. And so show and tell. And so the opening line is, that's essentially what it says. So that had gone on for a long time, but I had been writing. I was a full-time teacher. So of course, anyone who's done anything full-time and is also writing knows that it's a very tough thing to get writing accomplished when you're, got in the middle of a career. So at any rate, when I finally began to start to want to get something out there and consider publishing this, it really took some effort to join the two trains of communication that were going on to get the photos somehow in sync with the words. And some of that had happened already, but a lot of it I was sort of unaware why really I was taking these pictures. I just was. So that's kind of the issue. 2015, let me find again. Wait, here it is. Da-da. Okay. And
There we go.
Catamaran wonderfully, and it's a convoluted tale. Maybe we'll get to a little later. I don't want to get convoluted too early. I think that's always a good
Save it
idea.
for, yeah, the questions.
Yeah, later. We get convoluted later. I'm really going to get convoluted when this is over, by the way, Matt. I'm teasing you. I'm sorry, folks. I apologize. Anyway, um, the 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 catamaran issue, I had this essay out floating around for months, really going to various places, and finally was at a position where the entire book manuscript I was going to have publish it myself. I felt stuck. I thought there's no way I'm going to get this in print. And I would send things off, like I think all writers know how to, what this is like. I sent off a query letter to a publisher in Santa Barbara, and she wrote back and said, "Gosh, that's such a good query letter. I think I'd like you to, spend money to join my query letter writing class." This is what, that I was thinking. Actually, I'm really trying to get the book published, not join a query, learn to write a better query letter. Anyway, you get the picture. It was the Hall of Mirrors that we're all familiar with. So I was contacting the editor at the fabulous Elizabeth Mackenzie at Catamaran, saying, I've had this out there. You've been looking; it's in your pile, working its way toward the reading position, and I think I'm just going to publish this thing myself, and that will take away your first rights. It'll be published. And so she got back to me and said, "Well, let me see if Catamaran might like this because of the coastal idea." And they read it miraculously, and I mean it felt like an absolute miracle. In March of 2015, that this, they said, "Yeah, we'll run this." And I, after whatever I did, flipping, flopping, falling, etc., that became the thing. But actually having to write that essay, which Meter to the Black, was a way for me to attempt to work out an aesthetic, a rationale, although for such an intuitive and non-rational thing as writing a memoir, I don't know that the rational word, even RIP probably applies, but at least it was a kind of way of saying to myself, what the heck am I doing? And I thought of it as an envoy to send around, and it really helped and solidified my work. So, that was the deal. Ask another one, man. I'm sort of running out.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because it seems like the having a small piece of it published or like finished helped you really understand the larger project you were doing, which I think is
Absolutely. I
very,
sat
very
down
cool.
to write this, and it was somebody in the Midwest, actually. I was sending around I'm not sure what I had, I can't recall, some version of the first chapter with some pictures in it. Well, I think people who are tuned in, who hear folks who are wanting to write and writing memoir, you know, on the one hand, and the title of this is Beyond the Snapshot. And many memoirs have snapshots in them, and some are elaborate and others are casual and all kinds. Here's one I like a lot. This is show and tell. This is Carolyn C's Hard Luck Dreaming, Hard Luck and Good Times in America. And she studied this with a lot of snapshots of family, and they're very, very funny and cute, and she makes great use of them. This is another huge touchstone for me, although it took me a long time to find it. And this is Hold Still by the great Sally Mann. Astonishing. I mean, a great book. And
That's a
there are
great book,
both,
yeah.
really is. And there are both her tremendous, her great art photography and then just snaps from her family. Those are wonderful books as well. So the idea of putting pictures in memoirs is not so much a great new thing, but if you're using art photos, that is a photography that does not necessarily document. It rather, let's say, evokes, calls up a mood or a situation or a condition, an emotional place. Then that's something a little different. And when you send those things out, I hate to say it this way, but it is just another way for an editor to say, no, you see pictures. Just show me the words. Our magazine does words, I mean,
Yeah.
that you will run into that fairly often. So uh, I had to
Yeah,
sort of have a rationale around using pictures. So actually, a lot of the language that I wrote for the Meter to the Black essay was written really as a sense of what was I up to, and I described taking photos and developing photos and printing and all these processes and how they sort of what they figured to me, how I might see them as metaphors and registers of mood of some sort. So that initial essay was very helpful for me because then when someone when Counterpoint said they wanted the book, another miracle, I I was folding that material back in actually to the book manuscript, and I think it enriched it. Or I got several passages from it that I thought, oh, I really, I liked it. So that's kind of where I'm coming with that. Let me hear another question, man.
yeah. What about decoder ring? So that's your second, right, with Catamaran.
Well,
So what
yeah,
is there a development there? Is it the same art or piece? What did that?
as I've been thinking over these pictures, and I should probably stop and show some.
Yeah, why don't we see some of the pictures too?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. Okay, now you're gonna have to help me here.
Okay, so
Oh
share
my
screen
goodness.
at the top.
Share screen at the top. Where you are, you
And
click
then
you. Okay, always allow that. Okay, I'm going to take this up.
and then
I'm going to go
minimize
to
everything. There we go.
slideshow.
Play from start.
Start. That's the one. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Initially, this is one of the first roles I took. I'm sorry, we have an airplane. Great. It's PG&E again, folks. If you're
It's
an
always
enemy of
PG&E.
PG&E, they're checking the lines. That's what they do here in Magalia. At any rate, this is from the first roll of images that I filmed that I exposed on my old street. This is on Camino de la Costa in Redondo Beach, a half a block down from the intersection of Vista del Mar and Camino de la Costa, where I had lived as a child in an apartment there. And this is a much later picture. So
Hmm.
between this and this, there's about, oh my gosh, there's 20 odd years of taking pictures and thinking about how I might write about them. So this one was a kind of artifact of, an old place in Southern California for me. And I will jump through, here's another and another and another. And those kind of modern 50s, 1950s places and their emotional tone was what I was using to sort of help me find some words and find some thoughts and emotions that I was going to work with. But then this one was one I took just before the Great Fire of 2018, which this helicopter is reminding me about. We're living very close to the campfire, November of 2018, quite close to the burn zone. And so this was a little house in paradise, which no longer exists. If you think about this as, or I think of it, and really ironically, as a sort of renaissance, that is someone, thinking, Mantegna thinking, boy, this blue, what about this? This is a new thing for me. And then thinking here of not even Mannerist art, but maybe a Baroque art, or even
Hmm.
something as decadent as Rococo art. Here the artist is thinking, I'm a person who writes about pictures and have done that and have a whole book of it. And so here's a picture I might write about. So there's a sense across time like this of there being a fair amount of self-consciousness that has arisen over those years. And here's a pic of me, sort of some of this work I was doing. And this
Yeah.
is what things in the Midwest that I did more. So let me get back to our guy here. So this one, the Lewis Porch, was really late in the game uh, when I'm sort of much more aware of what's going on. But that has kind of been the process that I've been through, is trying to work through why these images also want to be talked about and why they are a kind of aid to memory, which is what I think most memorists need as much of that as they can
Yeah.
get. So let me get out of this and escape. I'll minimize this.
You want to move off the.
I'm
Shared
gonna
screen.
share that screen. If I can. Sorry. I don't understand, baby. Sorry. Clicked it.
Are
I've
you done
lost you,
sharing?
man. Where do I go? Oopie. I'm.
Here, I'll just end the share
Yeah,
screen
let's
for
do
now.
that.
Okay.
I'm done sharing.
Yeah, and I think I think it's
Okay.
really
Okay.
interesting the writing from the photographs that you do there. And I think you can really see the different elements of that. And also, I love the pair between this photo in paradise and the PG&E checking the lines as we speak. That's quite an interesting serendipitous
Yeah.
coincidence there. So why don't we go to some
Here
questions
we
and then
are.
we'll get to Vista Del Mar and maybe ask about that. But we have five
Sounds great.
questions already, so let's see
Oh
what
boy.
people want to.
Okay.
So, Neil, for a long-term project that absolutely has key visual components, how do you advise addressing magazine editors who either don't run photos, and this actually goes right to what you were saying, or assign their own photographers? For a book, is there an element that you'd put in the book proposal? Thanks.
Yeah. Good question.
Right?
My book proposals always had the photos in there. That was so woven in. I could not imagine getting the book, which is I could not imagine publishing the book without the photos, text only.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem the way I had conceived it and worked on it for all those years. On the other hand, it is tough to publish a memoir. I am a person who is very tough to publish a memoir because my life has very few things in it that are um, memorable, that are worthy. That there's not a huge disease. I have not
Yeah.
struggled. I don't have. I haven't been in a war. I haven't. You name it. All the sort of
Yeah.
large, kind of very powerful issues are not mine. I subtitled Vista Del Mar a memoir of the ordinary, and that's
Exactly.
really what it is. It's a meditation on life and growing up, and time and memory, and family, and all those things. So when I was sending out proposals, yeah, I was absolutely sending out a book proposal that said I need the pictures, and that's why, finding first folks like Catamaran who do run your photos. That's part of their brief, as we might call it, and then to have the enormous good fortune to run into Catamaran and the great Jack Shoemaker, at the time was their main, kind of reader and publisher, and a legendary man, and he was on board with that from the start. It wasn't we didn't have no one had to sell him. The book the the copy of the text, the manuscript he saw was full of pictures. So from the beginning, this was what he
Yes.
had in mind. So great luck. I should have been buying, lottery tickets all that day because I mean it really is. So folks who are sending things out know this. Now I also remember a really anyway, a happy day when I had a wonderful, oh my gosh, did I have an introduction and I mean, this is a gloried place, the Gettysburg Review. Oh my God, this heavy duty. And I had a great friend, Moria Simon, a wonderful poet. You'd buy all her books, you folks. Anyway, a terrific lady, and she has read stuff for me so generously and so well. So she knew, she had a contact at this highly respected review, wrote me this beautiful letter, and I came slipstreaming in behind this magnificent letter, going, "Here I am. I'm the guy you want to publish." And I came along, zipped in the text, and was something I can't recall what it was, but I was calling to check, and I can't. And I'm talking to the secretary of this of Gettysburg Review, and she's delightful. Of course, she's a completely nice person, and we've been chatting for a little bit. And I'd say, well, I'm just making sure. I don't know. Maybe it was a mail submission. I was making sure it was there. And I said something about and there are photos too. And there's a little pause. This is like a pause. And she said, oh, actually, the Gettysburg Review does not run photos. I said, oh, I was so green, I was just starting,
Yeah.
now stuff bounces off me. It's like, what? So what? Yeah, I know, anyway. But then I was so, oh, I just felt wounded. Oh, let me pull this arrow out and then we'll continue talking. It was really, so you have to really watch it. And it's now everybody has a very highly elaborate, beautiful website and they have content. Ask them. for heaven's sakes, ask them. I have a very fine friend who uh, had a beautiful piece of writing that had photos in it, but then got it published somewhere, and they refused to run those photos. They had their own, and these photos were not so great. And it was this epic, titanic struggle over So if that's what you have to sort of know that the photo is a way for an all text place to say, it's a beautiful piece of writing, but it's just, we don't do photos. It's another
So I
reason.
think a lot of it is the market itself, the people itself. You need to know whether or not the publication is even open to the idea of running your photos
Absolutely.
along with your piece or
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah. And some really are. And now,
Yeah.
if the writing is short enough, this is what I'm finding. The difference between print, I unfortunately write long. So the difference between print and, online is, you get to the 4,000 word limit or edge, whatever you want to say. And it gets a little trickier to get people to sit there and read it on a computer. It's just kind of so. And unfortunately, I'm just long winded. So my stuff tends to be kind of long. So on the one hand, a place that is online publishing, beautiful, and they will run photos, and they can do so with so much less hassle than a
Yeah.
print publication. So they might be much more amenable, but if you come to them with a 6,000 word piece and you say, here, by the way, there's like 5 photos that you have to be in this, or else it just, that kind of thing. That's probably not going to fly too far. So that's kind of my thought about it. And just in general of publishing books, one of the first things Jack said to me, again, I was as green as grass. And I remember being in his office. Look, I was thrilled to be, oh my God, I'm in my publisher's office. I was like 100 years old. It'd taken me a lifetime, but there I was. It was a great thing. And I said, well, I made some suggestion about how we might market our book. And there was a little pause. He was there with one of his great associates, and I think she was in charge of publicity. And there was kind of a 2, a 3, a 4 beat of silence. And then Jack looked at me kindly, and he said, Neal, it's really hard to sell books, and it was just, I said, Joel, what do you mean, Jack? Gee whiz, there's a whole bunch of flea markets around here. You get the picture.
Yeah.
It's another world. It's a tough world, really is. So that's all I'm going to say, because I was lucky once. That's all I can talk about. But so another
Yeah, it
question.
felt like that. It felt like luck. I see. Yeah. These questions are somewhat paired here. We have,
Yeah.
and they're from the same person, so it works out. We have, if you could spend an afternoon with a writer of your choice, who would it be, and what would you say to them? And then what photographers do you admire most? So paired,
That's a
writer and photographers.
great question. Well, I don't know that he would want to talk to me very much, but see, this is what happens when you're old and you forget things. It is DJ Waldy, okay, who wrote a brilliant, that is a brilliant memoir on living in Los Angeles. What is it? Holy Land by DJ Waldy. Wow, that's a winner. So I would love to meet with Mr. Waldy sometime, have an iced Americano and see what's going on, because
Yeah.
that's amazing. And there are other, oh my gosh, there are others. And photographers, well, for one thing, I would dearly love to be able to meet Sally Mann, and oh my gosh, what a fine writer. This is what's disgusting. It really is. It shouldn't be allowed, but she's a brilliant photographer and a fine writer. This is too much. This is something.
Yeah.
Anyway, it really is. Anyway, she's outstanding. Well, that's a great question that's asked about the photography. It's more show and tell for me. This is what I'm loving.
Yeah.
I would say Walker Evans got me going. When I first saw a copy of any of Evans' work, and especially Let Us Now Praise Famous Men with James Agee, all those images, and he had a retrospective, and of course he's long gone. But anyway, they did a huge retrospective at this SF MoMA. I'm going to say a year and a half ago, a couple of years ago. It was magnificent. But the other one is this gentleman right here. This is Robert Frank, The Americans, and my dad used to work in a department store, and a big thing on Friday nights, my mom and I would go pick him up, and then we'd go eat dinner, and his department was right next to the book department. So I'm a kid about 10 years old, and I'm in there one time, and I'm looking, of course, whatever's there. And this it's the publication date. It's 56 or 7. This thing is out. Even in Redondo Beach, California, it's sitting, there's a little stack of it. God knows how long it lasted. Couldn't have been long, but excuse me. But at any rate, I began flipping through it, and I sort of been fascinated by that ever since. And when I went to make photos, that was my choice. I was going to work in black and white. I was going to work in high detailed, film that had a lot of grain. I was going to work in that kind of mode. And those decisions were, of course, Frank was handheld Leica all the way. But on the other hand, that sort of sense of that black and white feeling was what influenced me a lot. So those are a few. Here's another book. If you were interested in writing around images, I highly recommend, and this is an obscure one, Wisconsin Death Trip. There's a title for you. That's
Okay.
from the 70s. Okay. Wisconsin Death Trip, Michael Lessie. This actually, believe it or not, is a legendary book. Okay. And it's the University of Arizona Press. This gentleman, Michael Leslie, is a very fine photographer, curator, writer about photography. And he ran across a huge collection of glass slides that were taken in a single little town up in the Midwest, Wisconsin, between 1890 and 1910. And he curated these, but he also wrote essays and responses to them. And I read that with great, great interest because it was someone who was working with both words and images. And what did they reveal? So there's my show and tell for the moment. And that's probably enough of an answer. I like photography a lot, so I could add a lot of names. I will just stop there.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great answer. I think the examples you show are all wonderful too. I've
Okay.
written some of them down for myself to check out later. So,
I'm glad to hear that, man. Good. I'm glad I'm doing some good here, man. I tell you.
so Barbara has asked, or has commented that you make her think of the French photographer whose name Bressai,
Yeah,
who
Riverside.
had to hire a bodyguard to safely navigate the street life of old Paris.
I'm
Have you ever
sure.
encountered a dicey situation as an urban, street, or nature
Yeah,
photographer?
it's a very good question. That's a good, yeah, that's a good one. I was determined that, well, here's to back up just a little bit. First, the top answer is no. People have been terribly nice, but you do stick out. You do look odd. And in small Virginia towns, when a rental car pulls over at the curb and, a middle-aged guy gets out with a tripod, this is like people are looking at you, they're going to, and a camera, and you sort of nod and look like, well, and you take pictures of like the corner of a building or I don't know, some basketball hoop or something, and they'll think, wow, who is this anyway? So you are a little bit visible, but it was kind of my decision to do that in order to get the high contrast and the high resolution image that I envisioned, that you saw in some of the those pictures. I really had to have a tripod. I used extremely slow film. I was so fortunate to have a wonderful photographer. When you teach in a rural community college like I did, you're kind of the only game in town. So the art departments there tend to have outstanding people because they've kind of made a vote. They've decided we're going to live in this rural area. And my God, how am I going to, do my photography and also eat? This is the hard part. So they tend to have teaching gigs. So there are talented people in these places. So Jeff Fricker, whose book on the Sacramento River, the Sacrament, it's called, magnificent art photo book, a really talented photographer. And he was a friend, and I began to talk about how I'd really like to take some pictures, and he, aided me. So we worked out the film. It's just extremely slow. It's not made anymore. AgfaPan 25. That's a low ISO number. You put that in a camera and get it on a tripod, and then you smack the ISO down to 12. Okay. So this is some mighty slow film. And then you meter to the black, and you let the highlights take care of themselves. And you set for aperture, so you've got the complete maximum depth of field. And I couldn't even touch the camera. I had to have a remote little button. So imagine how clown-like I looked, standing in the street. Well, in an odd way, that's how I worked. So I would first get up really early. So 6 is a good time. And I used to be able to do that. And I got up at 6 and I would go around these old neighborhoods of mine, and I felt more like this is my place anyway. I'd grown up there. I'd ridden a bike on that very place, and so I felt a little privileged. I was able to do this, so I took pictures. So people were very cool. The thing about apartments is, I grew up in apartments. It's different from houses. In apartments, there is naturally a kind of divided sense of responsibility. Nobody is really quite sure who's in charge. If they're so I would be absolutely trespassing, completely, absolutely no fooling, breaking the law, standing in these places taking pictures. But people would walk by, say good morning, and I'd say, oh, good morning, and I try to sound official, like I'm doing this for the apartment owner. I'm taking some snaps, or he's whatever. And so people were very cool about that. Now, when I was traveling, and I went to Buffalo, Wyoming. I went to family places. I went to Chadron, Nebraska. I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, Shreveport, Louisiana, various other places. In Virginia, certainly, southwestern Virginia. Now there, I could get nervous. I would be driving along and I could feel myself getting more and more kind of nervous. I would just make myself stop wherever I was and get out and take a picture. I didn't really care what it was. So I would just get the feeling of being out there doing this thing. And you were kind of noticed. So in a curious emotional way, it's part of your investment in a way in the project that you were going to make yourself visible. I don't know, it's an odd thought. And so now you probably don't need you can take magnificent black and white pictures. You can take all kinds of things without a tripod. These cameras adjust for any motion that you're making in incredible factors. So probably that's not necessary, but that's the practice I got into, and I appreciated it.
Yeah,
Well, Matthew,
that's fascinating.
I've lost you, my friend. Can you get me
I'm
back
not,
up?
you can't hear me?
I can't see you.
Oh, you can't see me. Fascinating.
Mm. Now I can just see me, which is really,
Can you
that's
see
not
me
helping
now?
at all. No. Should
Hmm.
I?
Why don't we both try refreshing it for a second? We'll see how it goes.
Okay. What's my, what'll, what'll my refresh thing? Okay. Just get out of.
All right. Wait. Okay, so we are viewable, so maybe there's some issue just with Neal's internet. He said it sometimes has to catch up a bit. So when he comes back, we'll get back to some of these questions. I see we have a few more adding in. Yeah, he's refreshing, so when he gets back, hopefully he'll be able to see me too. Otherwise, I'll just let him know that everyone else can see us both, and hopefully that will work. Um, but yeah, we have a few more questions in the chat to get answered, so we'll get to those in a second from Kathy and V Gatonde. So if anyone else has any other questions for when Neal returns, go ahead and drop them in there as well. I don't know how many of you saw some of the earlier events too, but they were really great. So make sure to also check those out on Crowdcast. So just 1 second while we wait, hopefully any second now. Yeah, and we will be back with Neal. Let me make sure. Let me just see how he's doing. Make sure he hasn't messaged me that he's having trouble. Yes, okay. He should be here. Okay. And what you can do in the meantime is,
Hey,
hey, there you
all right.
are. All right, we are back.
Okay,
Okay.
I was out in the ether there. That was scary. Okay. All
Yeah,
right,
we
Matt,
just needed
good.
a minute. Sorry about that. I had to re-invite you and get you back in here and I was having trouble finding you. All right.
Okay.
So, but we are back now. We're good. We're good. Everyone can see both of us. It's all fine.
Okay.
So, why don't we go back to some questions then? So,
Yeah,
if you,
please.
we have a question here that says, if you have a bunch of art photos and have no obvious common denominator, how do you find one and write the text around it and then decide which of the photos fit into it and which should be left out? So, kind of curatorial issue.
Yeah, the curation. Well, I had a lot of photos, which actually helps. The old rules 36. I would expose a couple each time I went out. I would try to anyway. I think by the time I was done between 1996 and boy 2006 or 7 or 8, I had several hundred photos of quite a few, several locales, mostly Redondo and other places. So it's quite, it's a tricky thing. You just sort of look over them and look over them and you decide. There's a lot of sifting, and any photographer will tell you that. And especially if printing is a possibility, I think having gone through the process, and I have big crazy stacks of prints, and if you go through those and say, which one am I committing to here? Am I going to spend some chemicals on? Am I going to put paper into? So and going over contact sheets and all that stuff, that kind of helps. And in a way, you do the same thing with digital now. I mean, I find I do, but it's something about sorting through physically seemed to help. So when I sat down to say, okay, looks like a chapter, and I'm writing stuff, then I'm thinking, okay, which photo now? So I got to say, words come first. But on the other hand, I have been taking pictures. So the words are coming, but those pictures are somewhere in the back of my mind about, I put let's say they're likely. Okay. So I'm looking for a likely picture, and I'm writing along and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that one would work. Oh, that one. Ah, that, so when it
Yeah.
came time to really put it all together, man, a lot of sorting had gone on. Okay. A lot of mental sorting and physical sorting. And so I just thought, well, okay, this is what it's going to be. And it is the tip of the iceberg. And any photographer who puts a book out, well, this, that what you have in that book or that, whatever that production is, oh, it is the top of a large mountain. This just takes a long time. And I have these photographer friends. They stun me. They say, "Yeah, I've been getting rid of some extra photo. Took the weekend. I got rid of about 100,000. Just like
Whew.
really. Oh yeah. It's after a while they just clog up your hard drive. I'm going, yeah, really? Do they? Is that 100,000? That's and I'm not kidding. You hear that? So
Wow.
yeah,
That I don't
people
know. There's something about just deleting 100,000 photos that has my heart
stunning,
race
isn't it?
immediately. But yeah.
Stunning. It is stunning. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So this, so that's kind of what it's about. Is that, and so the writing and the after a while, of course, it's a lot of years too, and there's a lot of back burner time. Stuff. So you might say to yourself, "I'm not even thinking about it," but in a way, you are. It's still there. It's part of you and your experience. And so you sit down after, gosh, who knows, 3 months, 6 months, you go, oh man, get back to this. And you go, oh, and there's a lot of what was I thinking moments, then that's not working at all. But then other moments you're going, oh my gosh, that's great. So it's just how it winnows out. Anyone else got
Well,
okay?
we have another great one that's kind of paired in. You kind of talked on it a bit, but when you're in your creative mode, do you start from the photograph and then write about it, or do you start from the writing and then find photographs to fit it?
Yeah, very early it was word only. I had I was a very miserable person in the sense of writing. I had started writing novels. I wrote, I was a creative writer in college, all that stuff, and started writing a novel at 25 and got it done in about 3 some years. And there it sat. It was not publishable, I don't think at all. It had its moments, like most of these
Yeah.
efforts do, but no one's going to want to buy this thing. And I plunged into another one. And in the meantime, we relocated, and that was a big thing. And I labored on that joyless exercise for about 7 years. And so this is why I've written many checks to therapists over the years, because this is how it is. You just get balled up in this project, and it just doesn't want to work for you, and that's how things aren't going well. You just can't finish this novel, and so that was a long time. So I just took a break, and that had grief in it as well. But still, I was teaching all the time, so that was fine. I just taught, and it felt good just to teach. Finally, early '90s, for some reason, I'm looking through some old photos actually, and I am inspired to write this little passage. It's like 2 pages, isn't it? Of just plain memoir, no fiction. And I'm just kind of, and somehow it kind of comes out okay, and I sort of like it. And I'm so green. I send it off, to oh my god. here goes. Okay, anyway. So I sent it to Three Penny Review, and that's a brilliant magazine, and all that. Those editors she is astounding. But anyway, it came right back naturally. But at any rate, I was sort of in the, I wanted to keep working. So really, early '90s is when I began to find this sort of memoir voice. Mid '90s, I was started the pictures. So stuff was kind of going in parallel tracks, and they needed to be entwined, and it took a long time to entwine them. That's sort of, that's the issue. Now that we're out of the Renaissance, we're out of, Greco-Roman, perfection and primitive, and now we're into the decadent era, in which I've done this all for 20 years now. It's much harder to say what's coming first or second or third. I got to say. Now I'm writing a bunch now, and I'm writing a second manuscript, and I have a lot of pages. But still, and there are photographs, but still, I got to say that the play of the image and the word it's pretty active. And there's times I'm thinking of a particular image. I have fun. Let me one last thing just to show you how ridiculous it is. I have a piece out now. It's called if I can think of it here, The Greek Coat. And the Greek Coat has this little opening, and I've been sending it around to the usual results. And so it has this opening sentence that is a reflection on a photo that I know that no longer exists, and that I had thrown away. I'm thinking, the poor reader, really, I have to, they have to sort through this. I've had to be very dexterous in that opening sentence to somehow get someone to read the next sentence, so because it just gets convoluted. That word again.
Yeah.
Gets convoluted. So anyway,
What
that's
about
I'll stop there.
what about the influence of the photograph and memory, right, within the memoir? So talking about Vista Del Mar, is the going back to your hometown, taking these photographs, is there a process there that is continually jogging the memory, rediscovering new things? Is it a way of focusing it? How does that play
Yeah.
out for you?
That's why I really I came to really appreciate the photos, because I understood, and I did not know at first, but I understood that what I was taking pictures of, surfaces, worn surfaces, windows, things that were kind of plants, were figures. A window is a partial metaphor for memory or recall. We are in one space. We have access to another. You can flip that into temporality. We are in one time. We have access into another. But at the same time, the intermediary medium, the window itself, is changing over time. The window is spattered. The window has been repainted. It's cracking. It is rusting. The screen needs repair. There's all these, and so many images I took are of that kind of situation where the view through itself is something subject to change and interpretation. So I have to say that the issue for memoir writers, obviously, we have nothing else to live on but memory. This is it. It's it. Especially non-fiction, supposedly, where we are
Yeah.
absolutely committed, and yet, and I have a very detailed memory for many things, and yet I have to say that I'm not even sure memory is a noun. Really, I'm not even certain that it is a kind of event. It is a kind of a verbal. Is it a, you I'm not sure what exactly memory is. I draw on them. I evoke them. I bring them out. I can recall them quite well, and yet, it's not so much recall in the sense of, the Sheldon
Yeah.
character, the Big Bang Theory. This is sort of, it knows everything all the time. That isn't the case. Rather, it's something. It is an image in the mind that wants to gravitate toward word. Okay. Now, both those things, I'm not even sure language can be a noun. Okay. Both those things are very tough to define. They are mental functions. And all I know is that in my writing, what I'm doing with my writing seems to be a kind of compulsion for whatever memory is that verb, and whatever languages, that verb, and those two activities. And I could read you a bit or two of what I mean
Yeah, why
in
don't
the
you do that?
in the idea. You want to think, should we do that?
Yeah, why don't
Let
you
me.
show us? Because I think it's interesting the way you're talking about how it's almost like your attempt is to capture the verb of memory in
Oh,
language itself, which
yeah,
both are
yeah,
moving
yeah,
medias in
yeah.
that sense.
Let me.
But in
Let's
the
see.
meantime, everyone, if you want to tell us where you're from, I know a few of us already have in chat. I think that could be a really interesting thing too. So we can see kind of the breadth of who is here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's see what I'm going to do here. Here's one. Can I now? Do you want me to go to a picture? It'd probably be better if we look
Yeah,
at a
if you have a
picture. Is that
picture, that'd be
okay?
great. Go ahead and
All right.
share
I'm gonna
screen on that.
I'm gonna minimize. Okay, I'm gonna share screen.
Yeah.
Options. It's under option, right?
No, it's under, if you just
Share.
hover over right next to, there's share screen.
It says share. Is that where it doesn't say share screen? Sorry.
Hmm.
Uh,
That might be it. If you're hovering over your image on the our page,
oh,
you
there it
should
is.
get a
Sorry.
share.
Thank you.
Yeah, there
Thank
you go.
you. Totally allow it. Boy.
No, you
Okay. Oop. Okay. Well, at least we're here, and I'm gonna bring up. Okay, and this here's the picture. So that's something anyway.
there we go. That's perfect.
Should we roll with this one?
Yeah.
Let's just do this. Okay. So this is from the essay Decoder Ring, and that's a suite of 5 short essays, and one of the essays, the one I'm reading from, is called the Lewis Porch, and the Lewis Porch is this photo. That is the porch that was owned by some folks named Lewis. And so let me find where I am here. Okay. Everything is digital now. Of course, no baths or chemicals needed, and no manipulation of light itself, except as it is rendered in binary values, so that relatively unskilled people like myself can still develop images. In the development software, I cropped the porch a little to accentuate the geometry of the railings, doors, and stairs, and made more adjustments. But the storeroom door at the bottom of the image still seemed undone. In the raw file, blank in a way that felt false, too easy a cover for what lay behind it. I began to make passes over it with a spot tool, and then could feel a certain concentration begin. With each pass, the textures became more detailed. As they rose out of the blankness of the original capture, I saw them become tactile, a lived surface attractive to life, pocked, grimed, and striated. It was a simple panel that had articulated from blank to mildly expressive, soiled and corner nailed. But these were the moments I had learned to look for, finally, a potential generative of vision and then of words, and those words of sentences, the sentences of skeins, webs and lines of stories. As a teacher of the pedestrian survey course, I'd taught Beowulf many times. Could anything be of less use to us? And yet this old thing held on in my reflections in its promise of a story that might form a vanguard, a pennant, a going forward day figured for me in the blissful morning crisscrossing of riders and paths in the light that holds the center of the poem and filigrees the monstrous void beneath. In photo development, carried over from its chemical days in the dark room and the literal pouring on of light, this attentiveness to and working of surface like dressing soil is called burning. So there's one,
That's
Matt.
wonderful. Yeah. Let me
Oh,
bring us
thank you.
back to the full.
All
Yeah, I mean,
right.
I think what's
Yep.
amazing about that one is the way this, when you think of memory as a verb, as you described, I think what you have really clearly in that passage is the way that the development of the photograph and the making of this photo and the changing of it is in a way your building of the memory too, and the way you're constructing that. So I
That's
think
my,
that's
yeah, that's my feeling, man. It really is.
yeah.
It's a complicated thing. And I have a great big, highly impressive looking book on my shelf, all with quotes on memory by many famous people. And I want to tell you, I'm terrified to pick that thing up. I haven't opened it once because I don't want, I don't want to
You
be
don't want it in
confused.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want, I'm confused enough. I do not need any more confusion. You get the picture. And the, this is kind of how it is, I think, but it is a profound mystery to me. And the interpenetration of word and image that is this kind of caduceus figure, two wrapped snakes,
Yeah.
at the center of how we are being, thinking about this stuff is draws me on. I'm going to put it that way. Kind of keeps
Y-
me rolling. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I think it's fascinating to me. I think, especially when I think about the way memoirs have this, like you said, ostensible nonfiction quality, right? But
yeah,
there are events that took place so long ago, and memory is that something that's so hard to grasp. But
absolutely.
we have a great other question too.
Good.
So
Super.
50, Diana asked, 50 years ago, I was a newspaper photographer in Pensacola, Florida.
Mhm.
I made some spectacular photos, including the KKK and Vietnamese
Mm,
refugees at Eglin
mm.
Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Is it possible for me to have them in my memoir, or is that a question for the Pentecostal News Journal?
Oh
Pensacola
my
side,
goodness. Who owns? Oh my gosh.
yeah, who owns the rights, I guess, is the larger question of that, which I
I
guess they would have to find out from them. But I
I hate
think,
to. Yeah.
yeah,
I wish I could say, oh, I know,
right.
but I honestly I do not know what
Yeah,
the
I think
story is.
that is going to be a difficult one to ask. But I think it would be fascinating to incorporate that into a memoir. I feel like that's a lot of what
Oh
a
yeah.
different type of way of doing.
Well, you can get permission. You
Right.
know,
That is,
some
have,
permissions are cut rate.
yeah,
Some little bit of a poem somewhere. And Jack Shoemaker's a brilliant, exponent of don't pay them a dime. It's just kind of this,
yeah,
every single use of it is fair use. Short of he'll.
yeah,
I'm teasing, but short of running, all of War and Peace or something. No, you get to quote, but let's not kid ourselves. Images,
yeah,
songs, song
yeah,
lyrics. I read about a guy who was writing just a happy little novel about being a rock and roll fan in the early '70s, and when it got all done, he had quoted liberally from all these cool rock songs that he knew. I think it cost him like 15,000 to try to get those things because the Rolling Stones don't give it away. This is
yeah,
why they're the Rolling Stones. They're, oh, sure, you can use that. This is, you know, and especially you don't ask the Rolling Stones, you ask their people, which is,
of course.
so anyway, just to throw that out there. So it is helpful to get permission. I'm not
Was this
sure.
something you've had to deal with in any way, or have you not had that issue with your photographs and such?
The photos, yeah, all the photos are mine, and so that hasn't
That's
been an issue. Quoting occasionally, early on, I contacted a couple. I'm not sure what the quote was, but I contacted some publisher somewhere, and it's always interns who talk to you.
yeah,
No, believe me, So this was a very nice, very charming sounding, happened to be a young lady working in Boston and picking up phones at whatever the company was. And so I made my question, and she said, well, I'll see if I get back to you here. Let me. And she sent me the standard deal, and of course it was going to cost a little bit of money, not terrible, but a little bit. But I mentioned it to Jack, who was so wonderful. And Jack said, oh, that's no problem. I said, really? Because they asked for $20 or whatever it was. I said, if it comes to that, I'll talk to. And he named the guy who owned the company. He said, I'll talk to him, and we'll get rid of that. I was like, oh my God, this is totally the way to go. This is how
yeah.
I just stepped into a limo. I was just leaning back, picking up. So anyway,
That's great.
otherwise I don't know the answer to those things. Thank you.
What about, okay, so for a final question, since we're going to wrap up a couple minutes early so we can move on to Jones talk, which I'm sure will also be
Absolutely.
great. And you'd agreed to that. So why don't you tell us what you're working on now, maybe a little idea of what is the creative process is.
Well, this piece I just read from for you, this decoder ring, I am thrilled to say, ta-da, appeared right there in the catamaran
There we go.
oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. This is why Jeopardy's a hard game to play, right? You're under time. Fall winter 2018. That was great. That was a thrill for me that these folks ran that. It was that. So it's a five. It is a. It's a photo. I call it photos and prose in 5 parts. It's a suite of essays, but each one of those is kind of being a seed I'm finding for the rest of the manuscript, which now is pretty darn long, or is getting up there to getting to book length. So it was again was a watershed moment for me to be able to see that in print and have it, have it legitimized and have it out there. And I owe a lot to Catherine and Elizabeth and everybody else on the Catamaran staff. And so that's Decoder Ring. And I don't know that that's going to be the ultimate title of the text. I have no clue, but it certainly got me started. And and you notice in that, it's more self-conscious about the relationship between picture and process. It's sort of like I'm really writing a kind of apostrophe to the moment in which I developed after taking the picture of the Lewis Porch, and then the fact that months later it is gone. It does not exist anymore because the fire took it. So many images that I made up here, local images around Paradise, California, they are now that's all that's left. But you learn that in taking pictures, and you learn that in memoir, is how much things pass. It really, all things must pass, and they are doing it no matter, and those things don't care what you think about it at all. And so a lot of images of my neighborhood are totally the only thing left of it. This stuff, even my old apartment house has been torn down. So this is what happens to you too. You're sort of carrying that memory and that image forward into time. And finally, you were the last kind of, holder of those moments. And I'm feel very lucky to be doing this, and I feel extremely grateful that Catamaran has helped, and that folks are calling and writing and all those good things. Matt, thank you so much. Let me
No,
know
thank you. I mean, that's a beautiful note to end on right there. So I think that is a good place to end. I will drop the link for our next chat
Sounds
in
good.
the okay, in the thing here. If everyone will stop messaging. Make sure to also click buy his books at the bottom, and you can get Vista Del Mar, a signed copy of it. Thank you so much. This was really an amazing talk. There it is. All right, and there's the link to our next broadcast, which will be starting in a few minutes. All right,
Thank you,
we'll see you
Matthew,
all
and
soon.
everybody. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
listening. Had a
Bye.
great time. Thanks, you